You look cheap enough to take 50 grand. How much to end this now? The words cut through the Providence municipal courtroom like a blade. A 22-year-old man in an expensive suit reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope, tossing it onto Judge Frank Caprio's bench with the casual ease of Simeone paying for parking. The envelope landed with a soft thud. $50,000 in cash fanned out across legal documents that represented decades of judicial integrity. Officer Riley the bailiff moved forward immediately. Judge Caprio raised one hand, a small gesture that stopped everything. "Mr. Clark," the judge said quietly. "Did you just attempt to bribe a sitting judge?" Mason Clark smiled. It was the kind of smile that came from a lifetime of never hearing the word no. "I prefer to call it an incentive. My father taught me that everything has a number. Courts, cops, politicians, everyone's got a price. You look like yours might be on the lower end, but I'm flexible." What Mason Clark didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the 72-year-old disabled veteran he had nearly run down 3 weeks ago was not just any victim. Harold Benton had served 3 tours in Vietnam. He had lost partial mobility in his left leg to shrapnel in 1969. And 41 years ago, in a moment that had apparently never been discussed in the Clark family, Harold Benton had done something for a young man named Richard Clark that changed the trajectory of an entire dynasty. Mason's father, the billionaire oil baron, the man who owned half the coast, the man whose fortune and entire family existed because a veteran had given a troubled teenager a second chance instead of pressing charges. And Judge Caprio knew every detail. "Tell us where you're watching from." Because what happened next in this Providence courtroom became one of the most viral moments in judicial history. The clock showed 9:48 a.m. Thursday morning. Case number 2025-TR5592 was about to become something Mason Clark would remember for the rest of his life. Miss Daniels adjusted her microphone. The tension in the room was electric. Everyone had just witnessed an attempted bribery of a sitting judge. Case number 2025-TR5592. The City of Providence vs. Mason William Clark. Charges include reckless endangerment, fleeing a traffic stop, attempted bribery of a law enforcement officer, contempt of court, and harassment of an elderly person. "This is a waste of time," Mason said. "How long until my lawyers get here?" "Mr. Clark," Judge Caprio said, his voice carrying controlled fury. "You just attempted to bribe me with $50,000. I'm adding attempted bribery of a judicial officer to your charges. Add whatever you want. My father will make it all disappear." 9:50 a.m. Defendant attempted bribery of judge in open court. Currency collected as evidence, contempt confirmed. Additional charge spending. Judge Caprio studied the young man in front of him. 22 years old. No prior convictions, but a file thick with incidents that had been quietly settled, verbal altercations with service workers. Property damage at exclusive clubs. A pattern of behavior enabled by unlimited resources. "Mr. Clark, I have in front of me body cam footage, sidewalk security video, text message screenshots, a voicemail recording, and officer notes. Would you like to explain what happened on the afternoon of March 8th? "Nothing happened. Some old man was shuffling across a crosswalk like he had nowhere to be. I honked. He overreacted, then some cop decided to make it his personal mission. The footage shows you came within 18 of striking him. Hess howled have moved faster. He's 72 years old with combat injuries that affect his mobility." Mason shrugged. "Not my problem. Can we speed this along? I have a flight to catch." The arrogance in Mason's voice was a performance. But Judge Caprio had spent decades reading defendants. Underneath the bravado, he could see something else. The particular kind of panic that comes from encountering a situation that money couldn't immediately resolve. "Mr. Clark, let me ask you something. When you threw that envelope on my bench, what did you think would happen?" "I thought you'd take the money, and we'd all go home." "That's how it works." "How what works?" "Everything. My father taught me courts are just another transaction, find the number, pay the number, problem solved. Your father taught you that? Heir taught me that everyone has a price, judges, cops, politicians, everyone folds when the money's right. Text screenshot submitted as evidence. From Mason to friend, dated morning of incident. Court today for that crosswalk thing. Dad said, judges fold when money's on the table. Bringing 50k cash just in case. Watch me buy my way out by lunch. Judge Caprio read the text aloud. Mason's smirk flickered. That was a private conversation. It was submitted as evidence. The question is whether it accurately reflects your expectations for this hearing. It reflects reality. My father owns half the East Coast. He's made bigger problems than this disappear. Has he? And where is your father today? Mason hesitated. He's busy running an empire. Too busy to appear in court for his son's criminal charges. He handles things differently. He makes calls. Officer Paul Hernandez took the witness stand. He was the responding officer who had initiated the traffic stop 3 weeks earlier. Officer Hernandez, can you describe the sequence of events on March 8th? Yes, Your Honor. At approximately 3:15 p.m., I observed a vehicle traveling at excessive speed through a residential zone. The vehicle approached a marked crosswalk where an elderly male was crossing with the assistance of a cane. What happened at crosswalk? The vehicle failed to yield. It passed within approximately 18 inches of the pedestrian, causing the man to stumble. The vehicle then accelerated and continued for approximately 3 blocks before I initiated a traffic stop. Did the defendant comply with the stop? Not initially. He continued for another block before pulling over. When I approached the vehicle, the defendant immediately told me his father was Richard Clark and that I should think very carefully about how I proceeded. Traffic stop micro timeline. 3:15 p.m. vehicle observed speeding through residential zone. 3:16 p.m. vehicle fails to yield to pedestrian and crosswalk. 3:17 p.m. traffic stop initiated. Defendant fails to comply. 3:18 p.m. defendant finally stops, offers officer cash. 3:22 p.m. defendant detained. Backup requested. Officer, did the defendant attempt to influence you? Yes, Your Honor. He reached into his jacket and pulled out what appeared to be several thousand in cash. He said, and I quote, "Here's $5,000 to forget you ever saw me. Consider it a down payment on your retirement." What was your response? I declined and informed him he was being detained. He then said, and I quote, "You're making a career-ending mistake. My father will have your badge by dinner." Harold Benton sat in the gallery, his hands folded in his lap. He was a slight man, weathered by age and injury, with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to endure pain without complaint. "Mr. Benton," Judge Caprio said gently, "would you like to address the court?" The elderly veteran rose slowly, gripping his cane. His movements were careful. Every step seemed to require concentration. "Your Honor, I walk slow. I've walked slow since 1969. Shrapnel took most of the muscle in my left calf. The doctor said I was lucky to walk at all. I don't feel lucky most days, but I'm grateful. Please continue." When that car came at me, I tried to move faster. I tried, but my leg doesn't work the way it used to. I felt the wind from that vehicle. I felt my cane slip. I thought I was going to die in a crosswalk because some young man couldn't wait 5 seconds. Mason interrupted. "This is ridiculous. He's fine. He's standing right there." "Mr. Clark," Judge Caprio said sharply, "you will not interrupt this witness. Or what? You'll add another charge to the pile my father's going to make disappear." 10:08 a.m. defendant interrupts victim testimony. Warning issued. Contempt noted. Harold Benton continued, his voice steady. "After the car passed, I heard the young man yelling from his window, He called me words I won't repeat in this court, words about my age. Words about my service. Words no veteran should ever hear from the country they fought for. Voicemail snippet submitted as evidence from witness Margaret Walsh. I was on my porch when I saw the whole thing. The car almost hit that poor man. Missed him by inches. And then the driver, just acted, leaned out his window and screamed something horrible. Something about useless old soldiers. The veteran just stood there shaking. I called 911 immediately. Judge Caprio looked at Mason. Useless old soldiers. Is that what you said? Mason's jaw tightened. I was frustrated. Traffic was moving slow. You were frustrated with a 72-year-old combat veteran who walks with a cane because he took shrapnel defending your freedom. Whatever. My father will handle this. The side door opened. A man walked into the courtroom. Richard Clark, the oil baron, the billionaire, the man Mason had invoked like a magic spell for the past hour. He walked slowly, his shoulders slightly curved, his face carrying an expression that Mason had clearly never seen before. "Shame, Your Honor," Richard Clark said quietly. "May I approach?" "You may." Richard walked past his son without looking at him. Mason's confident posture crumbled. "Dad, finally tell them. Tell them how this works. Tell them about the lawyers." The Mason, "Be quiet." The words were sharp, final. Mason fell silent. "Your Honor, I apologize for my son's behavior, and I apologize for my own failures that led to it." Case file note revealed at judge's request. Richard Clark, defendant's father. Sealed juvenile record from 1984. Charges: attempted theft, property damage, assault on a shopkeeper. Record sealed upon completion of rehabilitation program. Rehabilitation supervised by Harold J. Benton, then a community volunteer with Providence Youth Services. All charges dropped upon Benton's recommendation. Secondary note: Richard Clark's first business loan, 1987, was co-signed by Harold Benton. First refiner purchase, 1992, was partially financed through Benton's personal savings, repaid with interest by 1998. Judge Caprio read the notes aloud. Mason's face went white. "Dad, what is this?" Richard Clark finally turned to face his son. "In 1984, I was 17 years old. I was angry, entitled, and convinced the world owed me something. I tried to rob a convenience store. I assaulted the owner when he tried to stop me. I was arrested and facing serious time. Harold Benton was a volunteer with a youth rehabilitation program. He saw something in me that I did see in myself. He convinced the court to give me a second chance. He supervised my community service. He taught me discipline, accountability, respect." The courtroom went completely still. "And when I wanted to start my first business," Richard continued, "Harold co-signed my loan. When I needed capital for my first refinery, he gave me his savings. Everything I have, everything you have exists because that man believed in a troubled kid who didn't deserve it." Mason stared at Harold Benton. The elderly veteran met his gaze without anger. Just a quiet, weary patience. "I didn't know," Mason whispered. "Of course you didn't, because I never told you. I was ashamed of who I used to be. I thought if I gave you everything, you'd become better than me. Instead, I created someone who tries to bribe judges and screams slurs at elderly veterans." Like this video if you miss Judge Caprio, because this is exactly the kind of moment that made his courtroom legendary. "The man you nearly killed," Richard said, his voice breaking, "is the reason you exist. The reason our family has anything. The reason you've never wanted for a single thing in your entire life." Harold Benton spoke for the first time since his testimony. "I don't hold grudges, Richard. You know that. When I saw your son's name on the police report, I hoped maybe he had some of you in him. The real you, the kid I knew before the money changed things." "Does he?" Richard asked. "I don't know yet. That's up to him. Mason was crying now. Silent tears that he seemed unable to stop. Mr. Benton, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Would a they've mattered, son? Would you have treated me differently if you knew I saved your father? Or should you treat every person with dignity regardless of the connection to you? Mason couldn't answer. The question hung in the air, demanding an honesty he wasn't sure he possessed. Judge Caprio waited until the emotion in the room had settled. Mr. Clark, Mason, I want you to understand what has just been revealed. The man you nearly killed. The man you called useless. The man you screamed slurs at in a crosswalk. He is the reason your family exists. Harold Benton gave your father a second chance when he didn't deserve one. He invested his own savings in your father's dreams, and in return you tried to run him over because he walked too slowly. Mason wiped his eyes. I understand now, Your Honor. I don't think you do. Not yet. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to understand it. Sentencing Micro Timeline. Case 2025 TR 5592. Days 1 to 7. Written apology to Harold Benton. Court reviewed. Days 1,180,180 hours community service with Veteran Mobility Program. Days 1 to 60 ethics training program certified completion required. Days 1 to 90 anti-corruption seminar mandatory attendance. Immediate restitution payment to court for bribery attempt $5,000. Day 180 reflective essay on dignity and accountability minimum 3,000 words. Day 180 follow-up hearing. Here is what I'm ordering. First, you will write a letter of apology to Mr. Benton. A real letter, your own words, your own understanding of what you did and why it was wrong. Yes, Your Honor. Second, you will complete 180 hours of community service with the Providence Veteran Mobility Program. You will help elderly and disabled veterans with transportation, medical appointments, daily tasks. You will learn what your father apparently tried to teach himself but failed to teach you. I understand. Third, you will complete an ethics training program and an anti-corruption seminar. You will learn that the justice system is not a transaction. That courts cannot be bought. That attempting to bribe officers of the law is not how things work. It's a crime. Okay. Fourth, you will pay restitution of $5,000 to court for your attempted bribery. This is not a fine. It is a consequence for treating this institution like a marketplace. Yes, sir. Finally, you will write a reflective essay on dignity and accountability, 3,000 words minimum. You will submit it at your follow-up hearing in 180 days. And at that hearing, I will assess whether you have truly changed or whether you're simply waiting for this to be over so you can return to who you were. The months that followed were the hardest of Mason Clark's life. He showed up at the Providence Veteran Mobility Program on his first day expecting hostility. He found indifference. The veterans didn't know who his father was, they didn't care about oil refineries or private jets. They cared about whether he showed up on time, whether he drove carefully, whether he treated them with basic respect. Community Service Log, Week 3. Defendant has completed 28 of 180 required hours. Initial attitude described as distant but compliant. Staff notes defendant seems uncomfortable with physical assistance tasks. Assigned to transportation duties under direct supervision. For the first 3 weeks, Mason drove veterans to medical appointments. He waited in hospital parking lots while they saw doctors. He helped them into and out of vehicles carefully, patiently learning their names and their stories. By week 5, something shifted. There was a Korean War veteran named Samuel who had lost his right hand to frostbite during the Chosin Reservoir campaign. He needed help with almost everything. Buttons, zippers, opening doors. Mason was assigned to assist him 3 mornings a week. "You're the Clark boy," Samuel said one morning. "Yes, sir." "The one who nearly hit Harold?" Mason looked down. "Yes, sir." Why'd you do it? I thought I was better than him. I thought money made me important. Does it? No, I know that now. Samuel studied him for a long moment. Harold and I served together, different wars, but we crossed paths at VA. He's one of the good ones, patient, kind, never holds a grudge even when he should. I know he saved my father. And you still treated him like garbage. I didn't know, but that's not an excuse. I should have treated him with respect regardless. Samuel nodded slowly. You're learning. That's something most rich kids never do. Week 12 brought the meeting Mason had been dreading. Harold Benton came to the mobility center for his regular assistance appointment. Mason saw him across the lobby and felt his stomach drop. He walked over slowly. Mr. Benton, the elderly veteran, looked up, recognition flickered in his eyes. Mason, I'm still here. I'll be here for a while. I heard the staff says you've been putting in the work. I've been trying. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. That's how you know the change is real. Mason sat down across from him. I wrote you a letter. The court reviewed it, but I never got to say it to your face. So say it, Mr. Benton. I treated you like you did in Texas. I nearly killed you with my car and then I screamed things at you that I am ashamed to even remember. I didn't know you saved my father, but that doesn't matter. I should have treated you with dignity regardless of any connection. Go on. You saw something in me, Dad, when he was a mess. You gave him a chance when nobody else would. You invested your own money in his dreams, and because of that, I have everything I've ever had. My entire life exists because you believed in a troubled teenager. Harold Benton was quiet for a long moment. Your father was a handful, angry, entitled. Sound familiar? Mason almost smiled. Yeah, it does. But underneath all that anger was a kid who was scared. Scared he'd never amount to anything. Scared the world had already written him off. I just saw past the fear to what he could become. Can you see past my fear? I'm trying to. You're remaking it easier than he did. I'll give you that point. 180 days after his initial hearing, Mason Clark returned to Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. He looked different, the arrogance was gone. The designer suit was still expensive, but the man wearing it had changed. Something in his posture, his eyes, the way he held himself. Mr. Clark, Judge Caprio said, I see you've completed all terms of your sentence. 180 hours of community service, ethics training, anti-corruption seminar, restitution paid. Essay submitted. Yes, Your Honor. The reports from the mobility program say you continued volunteering after your required hours were complete. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. I go 3 times a week now. I'm helping to establish a new transportation fund for veterans who can't afford rides to medical appointments. That's significant. What changed? Mason took a breath. I met people who showed me what my father understood before he forgot it. That every person matters. That dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you give. That the measure of who you are isn't what you have, but how you treat people who have nothing. Harold Benton was in the gallery. He rose slowly, gripping his cane. Your Honor, may I speak? Please, Mr. Benton. When this started, I was tired. Not angry, just tired. Tired of a world that produces young people who think money makes them gods. Who think veterans are useless because we walk slow and need help. He turned to Mason. But I've watched this young man change. I've seen him driving veterans to appointments, helping them with groceries, sitting with them when they're lonely. He's not the same person who threw $50,000 on a judge's bench. Richard Clark was in the gallery, too. He stood slowly. Your Honor, may I address the court, please? 6 months ago I walked into this courtroom ashamed of my son, ashamed of myself, ashamed of what my wealth had done to my family. I thought I was giving Mason everything. Instead, I was giving him nothing that mattered. He looked at his son. I'm proud of you now. Not because you completed your sentence, because you chose to become someone different, someone worthy of what Harold Benton did for me all those years ago. Subscribe if you re over 50 and love real justice, because moments like this are why this courtroom became sacred to so many people. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Mr. Clark, I want to leave you with something. You walked into this courtroom 6 months ago and threw $50,000 on my bench. You believed justice was a transaction, that courts could be bought, that money made you untouchable. I was wrong about everything. You were, but being wrong isn't the end of history. It's the beginning. Your father learned that lesson 40 years ago when Harold Benton gave him a chance he didn't deserve. Now you have the same opportunity to honor that legacy, to become someone worthy of it. I will, Your Honor. I promise. Judge Caprio turned to Harold Benton. Mr. Benton, do you have any final words? The elderly veteran nodded once. Just one thing. I've spent my whole life believing in second chances, in the idea that people can change if they are willing to do the work. Richard proved me right. And now maybe his son will, too. He looked at Mason. Make it count, son. That's all I ask. Mason's voice was thick. I will, sir. I promise. Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. Case closed, Mr. Clark. But remember, justice is not for sale, dignity cannot be bought, and the only currency that truly matters is the person you choose to become, one act of decency at a time. I understand, Your Honor, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning it. The gavel fell, and in a Providence courtroom, the young man who had once believed his father's fortune made him untouchable discovered that the only inheritance worth having is the character you build for yourself, dramatization for storytelling and education, not legal advice or reporting.